Okay, introduction to the reproductive system. We're going to start with the male, the anatomy. So this structure here, the sac that holds the testes, is the scrotum. The testis, if there's one, or testes, when it's plural, more than one. That is where the sperm is produced. So the sperm that is produced by the testes is going to contribute 5% of the overall seminal fluid. So in the seminal fluid, only 5% of the seminal fluid is actually sperm. Okay, now the testes also belongs to another system, which is the endocrine system. It is a gland, and it makes the hormone testosterone. Now, sitting on top of the testis is the epididymis right here, and the immature sperm, when they're first made, the spermatozoa have to get pushed through this epididymis, and they travel through this epididymis. Takes about 20 days to get pushed through this entire epididymis, and during that time the spermatozoa are maturing, and then from there the sperm travel through this passageway, which is the vas deferens, also known as the ductus deferens. This is the vas deferens. It takes the sperm to the back of the urinary bladder. So this big organ here is the urinary bladder. The urinary bladder and the ureter or the ureter, that is coming from the kidney. So this is the ureter. This is the vas deferens. Okay, so this is a different model that I have of the male. So see if you can name those structures on this model. So pause the video and see if you can name organ number 1, organ number 2. What is the name of this passageway number 3? It's coming all the way to the back of the urinary bladder. We have the urinary bladder, and then this passageway right here is the urethra, and that's how the urine exits the body. The urinary bladder, urethra, and name this structure X, which is the sac. The testes is inside the sac, and give the name of the region K. That's something that you had to know from the very first I introduced it to you in terminology. So if you haven't already, pause the video and make sure you can name all those parts from this model. Okay, within the testis, okay, inside, so here we have the scrotum. Inside the testes, or the testis for just being one, we have these structures, which are the seminiferous tubules. And those seminiferous tubules, that's where you're actually making the sperm. So spermatogenesis is occurring within the seminiferous tubules. And then scattered between the seminiferous tubules are the interstitial cells of Leydig, and those are the cells responsible for producing and releasing testosterone. Okay, so I want you to know those, the interstitial cells of Leydig. And then also right here, sitting on top of the testis, is the epididymis. And the swollen end of the penis is called the glans penis. Okay, here's a good picture of the testis. This is the epididymis sitting on top. This is epididymis. This is going to be the vas deferens here. Testis, epididymis. Now, this in here are those coiled up tubes, which are the seminiferous tubules, and then scattered, the cells that are scattered between the seminiferous tubules are the interstitial cells of Leydig. Now, once you get to the back of the urinary bladder, you see these two glands. This is the seminal vesicle. It produces 35% of the seminal fluid, and it is mostly fructose, which gives the sperm this energy that it needs to be able to swim, because the flagella is a very powerful structure that can whip the sperm and move them very quickly. So that's going to require a lot of energy. So the seminal vesicle produces and puts into the seminal fluid about 35% of the seminal fluid, which is mostly fructose. And then the prostate gland, which wraps around the urethra, it contributes 55% of the seminal fluid, and it is it's pretty much all bicarbonate ions. And those bicarbonate ions help to neutralize the acidic environment of the male urethra and the female vagina. So it just protects the sperm from acid environments of the male urethra and the female vagina. Now on this picture, the seminal vesicle is here. So here's the vas deferens coming to the back of the urinary bladder. This is the seminal vesicle, and this is the prostate gland. And then there's another itty bitty gland right here, which is the bulbourethral gland or Cowper's gland, and it contributes the remaining 5% of the seminal fluid, which is also bicarbonate ions, and that is believed to be contributed to the seminal fluid, but kind of like first. And so it kind of rinses out this dirty urethra. The bacteria are traveling up there. It rinses it out to get it ready for the sperm to travel. And that swollen end of the penis, again, that is called the glans penis. And here we have the scrotum and the testes. On this model, there's the seminal vesicle right there, prostate gland. That number 8 right there is the Cowper's gland, also known as the bulbourethral gland. 13 is the swollen end of the penis, which is called the glans penis. And then the skin right here that covers, when babies are born, they're born with this skin that is called the foreskin or the prepuce. And what is the name of that when they remove, what's the surgery called when they remove sometimes, not always, but sometimes they remove the foreskin? That is called a circumcision. But you're born with the foreskin to protect the glans penis. So here we have the urinary bladder. This passageway going into the urinary bladder right here is the ureter, and this passageway here is the vas deferens. Then we have seminal vesicle at the back of the urinary bladder, prostate gland, and right there, what is that? Cowper's gland or bulbourethral gland. And this skin that covers the gland, covers it, protects it. That's the foreskin, also known as the prepuce. And this is going to be the scrotum, testes, and epididymis here. And then you also see the vas deferens right here. Okay, were you paying attention? So pause the video and see if you can name all of those parts before moving on for a review. Okay, here's another one I want you to review before we move on to the female. The organ indicated by 6. So that is going to be epididymis. X is the testis or testy. That's going to be the seminiferous tubule. The cells that are scattered within here are the interstitial cells of Leydig, and what the cells produce are testosterone. The testes belongs to what two organ systems? So reproductive system, where it makes the sperm, the male gamete, but also the endocrine system, where it produces the hormone testosterone. Just, you know, now that we just got finished learning them, so this is a good time to kind of review it, go over it, make sure you know it. Without looking at your list of all this anatomy you have to know for the lab practical. Okay, so the female. We're going to start with the ovaries, which is this organ right here, number 1. The ovaries, remember that belongs to two organ systems. So it's the endocrine system, in which it makes estrogen and progesterone, but it's for the reproductive system, it is making the female gamete, which is the egg or the ovum. The fimbria, they're kind of like finger-like structures that kind of just sit on top of the ovary. And there's the opening to the fallopian tube. So number 2 here, this passageway is the fallopian tube, also known as the uterine tube, that carries that egg. It helps, the egg is to travel through the fallopian tube to the uterus. This part right here of the fallopian tube, where it's kind of turning, is called the infundibulum. So we have the ovary, the fimbria, the fingers, fallopian tube or uterine tube, right here where it turns, infundibulum, and this organ is the uterus. All right here. Uterus is sitting on top of a urinary bladder, and this passageway is the urethra. Okay, this is the uterus. This is the vagina. The vagina is copulatory organ. So this is the passageway. Urinary bladder, urethra. So what is the name of this organ right here? That is going to be the ovary, and these fingers sitting on top, the fingers. So we have the ovaries, the fingers are going to be the fimbria. This passageway here is going to be the fallopian tube or uterine tube. And what is this part right here where it's the turny part, the little turny, now that's a special area. It's called the infundibulum, and the reason it's special, the reason we have named this turny part is because that is where, when the egg is released, that is where you actually have fertilization. So the sperm, they swim all the way from the vagina through the uterus up the fallopian tube to the infundibulum, where the sperm fertilizes the egg, and then once the fertilization occurs, the two kind of get married, and the nucleus is joined, and it becomes a zygote, but it's fertilization and syngamy that happens. And then we have the uterus right here. And what is this passageway? That is going to be the vagina. So the vagina, the uterus, the urinary bladder sitting right here. And what is this passageway? The urethra. So right here then we're going to have the uterus sitting on top of the urinary bladder. And this passageway is going to be the urethra. And this passageway is the vagina. So you have the uterus. Uterus, the top part of the uterus, just like the top part of the stomach, top part of the uterus is the fundus. And then the endometrium is the blood-rich lining of the uterus, the endometrium, and then you have the muscle layer of the uterus, which is the myometrium. So endometrium is this blood-rich lining, and then myometrium is the muscle of the uterus. The cervix is the opening to the uterus. The cervix, the vagina. The vestibule is this area right here where you have the opening to the urethra and you have the opening to the vagina. Because a vestibule is like a room. When you walk into the vestibule, there's got like lots of doors. It has lots of doors. So this is just kind of like the vestibule. It's kind of like the area. You got this door, you got that door. The labia minora is the first little fold of tissue. And then the labia majora. So that is like the foreskin. It's skin to protect the labia minora. So labia minora is kind of like the glans penis of the male. So labia minora, labia majora, and then the clitoris right here is the tissue that can fill up with blood, and it's erectile tissue, so it can swell. The vulva, that is all of the external female genitalia. So that's going to be the labia minora, labia majora, and the clitoris. So this plus this plus this. These three together make up the vulva, which is the external female genitalia. We have the urinary bladder and the urethra. And this is another model I have of the uterus. What is the top part of the uterus? Top part of the uterus is the fundus. The blood-rich lining is the endometrium, the muscle layer. Myometrium, the opening to the uterus, is the cervix, and this is the vagina. So then we have the ovary. The fingers are the fimbria. This passageway is fallopian tube, and this little area right here, what was the name of this area right here? That's called the infundibulum, and that is where the sperm are supposed to, like, if everything happens according to plan, the sperm is supposed to fertilize the egg, and then you have syngamy, where they kind of like join. So the sperm swim all the way from the vagina through the cervix to the uterus, up the fallopian tube to the infundibulum, where fertilization occurs. Fertilization and syngamy. Okay, pause this video and see if you can answer those questions on this model. I'm trying to find 11, 12, and 13. So this is 11, this is 12, and this is 13. So it says, give the name of 11, 12, and 13 all together. 11 is right here. Kind of have this thing, 11, 12, and 13. Okay, review that model. Answer all those questions. What was this a model of? Do you remember seeing this? This was introduced in the Introduction to Endocrine System video. And that is it for the introduction to the reproductive system.